Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's What Turns You On webinar. I'm Dr. Alexandra Katehakis, and today is Monday, August 4th, and we're going to be talking about fantasy and orgasm challenges today. So please think about these topics, bring your questions as we go along. And a few things as usual before we start. I just want to remind you to please type your questions into the Q&A box. So not the chat box, but the Q&A box, because that's the only place I can see them. And then I'll answer them as we go along. And also be sure to leave us your book reviews or comments on Amazon for What Turns You On. Let us know what you love about the book, how you're using the workbook, if you have shared it in ways with a partner. Even one line will do. I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. And if you're watching on YouTube, as always, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to it by clicking the subscribe button below, and that way you'll never miss a post on our YouTube channel. You can also keep up with what we're doing by following me on Instagram at Alex Katehakis or at Center for Healthy Sex. And then lastly, make sure to sign up for our mailing list by clicking the link in the chat box so you can keep up with upcoming events, webinars, and anything else we have going on here. And as usual, if I mention a book or a URL, you'll see it show up in the chat box. And just a reminder that this particular webinar series explores aspects of my workbook, What Turns You On, a guide to living your best sex life. And it's designed to help you get honest with yourself about how you define sex so you can enjoy the kind of touch and sexual activities you really enjoy, and so you can have explicit and meaningful exchanges with the sexual partner. So really helping you to deconstruct any shame or discomfort about talking about sex. All right, so let's start by looking at fantasies. What are fantasies? What's okay in fantasy? What isn't okay in fantasy? That's ultimately for you to answer. But for starters, it's useful to think about fantasy as a pathway in the brain that allows for a type of daydreaming, which everybody has experienced before. And that daydreaming is a channel or a path through which the artist or even the mathematician create. It's a human power that allows us to imagine the impossible or improbable. So imagination is a form of fantasy, imagining putting a person on the moon, imagining taking a vacation next summer to a beautiful island, imagining what it will be like 5 years from now. All of that is a form of abstraction that human beings solely possess. And in that daydreaming, it can be wildly creative. If we do it a lot, especially as children, because we live in a household that feels emotionally unsafe or is literally physically unsafe, we start to find it difficult over time to actually live in what we would call shared reality, that it's easier to drift off into fantasy or live in a fantasy world, but that will have a person feeling stuck in their lives and unable to function or unable to create or produce or sometimes even hold down a job. So when we're lost in a world of unreality and we are buffered from human connection, fantasy is a solo act that can take us into the, absolutely unbidden world of the erotic because there are no limits in fantasy. We can recall erotic experiences of the past, and we can imagine future sexual experiences also. So we can wander all over the universe. Whatever we can imagine, we can experience in our fantasy. And sometimes fantasy can be about a friend, a stranger, a fictional character that you've created in your own head. So it's good to let your mind wander and see what naturally emerges in your fantasy. I mean, recently I had a fantasy about contacting an old friend that I haven't talked to for decades and wondering what that conversation would be like. And there's a part of me that knows that I have an expectation of what I would like it to be like and why I would want to see this person. But another part of me knows that it won't go that way. It won't go the way that my fantasy would like it to go. It's going to go the way that it goes. And there's nothing I can do about controlling that outcome. So if I choose to go through the trouble of finding this person, making contact with them, getting together and talking to them, which would be a lot of energy, and a lot of time put into it, I have to dial back my expectation of what my fantasy would like it to be. So remember that fantasy is just that. It lives in the imagination, and it's not meant to be acted upon in real life, but it can be acted upon in real life. It's just once we act upon it in real life, it's no longer a fantasy. So you get to be the creator, the director, and the actor in your fantasy. So you get to decide in your sexual fantasy who's doing what to whom. So remember, there are no thought police. Only you and your judgments about what you think and feel about something. And remember, just because you've conjured something that's taboo or not politically correct, or what you would actually want to engage in, um, that doesn't mean um, it doesn't mean that you actually want to engage in things just because you've conjured them up in your head. Fantasy is the world of make-believe, and in make-believe, anything can happen. We can be fairies with wings and spread fairy dust and heal the world. There's no limit to what we can and can't create in our heads. But if you are possessed by sexual fantasies, so much so that you avoid your actual partner, and the possibility of connection with them, that can create problems in your relationship over time. And that is the dark side of fantasy. That is isolation, is the dark side of fantasy. Because healthy sex requires a solid level of what I would call psychic presence. You really have to be there. And that is a place where creativity and imagination can playfully emerge between two people. So that when you're present with your partner, you can co-create your sexual fantasies. They may start out in one realm and they end up in another realm. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you are in this co-creative dance. And when you're in command of your fantasies, you can play them out. You can talk about them afterwards. You can learn from each other about what's arousing, what worked, what didn't, what felt silly, what felt problematic. You're just in the place and the realm of experimentation. So just remember that being present lets you use your sex life consciously, and it's a way to grow, change, and connect, and to grow into a more adult sexual being. It's a way to bring your fantasy to life, or a way to do that is to take time to talk about what types of fantasy you might like to co-create with your partner. And then are they playful? Are they naughty? Are they erotic? Like, what is the thing that both of you would like to engage in? Or maybe it's all of the above. So you can start with one sentence, then take turns building on this theme and see where that leads you so that you are co-creating this story together. And that might be, very arousing. It might be very playful. It might feel silly. It might feel funny, but let yourselves wander and see where it takes you. It's a form of improvisation. Sometimes we can use sexual fantasy so as not to feel guilty about our sexual feelings. And as I stated earlier, sexual fantasies are like daydreams because there are no restrictions on what we can conjure up. We get to play without consequences. So hopefully there's no shame attached to what your quote wildest dreams are. And fantasy may be our most natural and neutral mental power. So think about that. When you're having sexual encounters in your real life, do you find yourself easily distracted, or do you notice your mind slipping into fantasy, leaving your partner behind? And what happens when images of porn flood your head? What do you do then? What do you think is in the best interest of your partner and your sex life in that moment? And are you able to achieve orgasm being present with the person you're engaged with? Or do you find that you have to think of something else or someone else in order to orgasm? And which do you prefer? And which do you think your partner prefers? And is there anything you want to work on related to this topic? So these are questions for personal excavation, for journaling, for you to really put some thought in and to get honest with yourself and honestly answer them to yourself. Because if you're not honest with yourself about it, then how are you going to be honest with a partner about it? And then what are some of the stories you've created about sexual experiences that may be limiting you from engaging with some people or holding you back from expressing your full sexuality? For example, if you say, I don't like kissing, or I don't like tongue in my mouth, or I don't trust men with beards, where do you think those things came from? Or are they just ideas that you have and you just shut those things down? Really take stock and take yourself on with examining where these things have come from and find out if they're really true, or if you want to make adjustments or change things. And then when you think about sexual fantasy, what of your fantasies do you like? In general, if a sexual fantasy or act is what they call a hell yes, then go for it. Fantasy should have an element of play to it, as I've been saying, even if it's oriented towards what we might call darker themes. And arousal, play, pleasure, a sense of feeling good about yourself should always accompany the sexual acts that you want to try. And if you're not sure, if let's say it's a maybe, that's okay too. Talk to your partner about that. Um, and talk about those fantasies and make it consensual and safe. And then once it is, I would say just go for it and try it. All right. Well, the next topic is about orgasm challenges for women. And the first question I would ask is, do you struggle with pain or discomfort during sex, which is commonly called pelvic pain disorders? Um, and do you have difficulty achieving orgasm, which is also called anorgasmia? Maybe you've heard that term before. If so, just keep in mind that you don't have to suffer. There are numerous pelvic pain disorders that have been sussed out by the medical field. Some of them you may have heard of, like vaginismus or vulvodynia or dyspareunia. And all of these are different kinds of pelvic pain disorders, and there are solutions for each one of them. So you just have to find the right mental health professional or um, pelvic pain expert on that. So someone who's a physical therapist that works in these areas with pelvic pain. And some of them are easy fixes, like um, remembering to breathe during sex, or learning that your pelvic floor muscles are too tight or they're too loose. And these conditions can be rectified with simple home exercises like breathing and Kegel exercises or using vaginal dilators. Other conditions might take a little longer to get under control, but if you persevere, you can definitely move from painless to pleasurable sex. Uh, So, I think it's important for you to know that there are pelvic floor specialists out there. We have access to many of them here in Los Angeles, so you can always write to us or you can email us 310-843-9902, and we can give you referrals for that. And you should know that insurance covers pelvic floor specialists. So if you need to go see somebody, they're also called vaginal physical therapists. Your medical insurance should cover that. And if you have had these problems, it's always a good idea to start with a gynecologist or a pelvic floor specialist for these issues. So don't be shy about it. Don't put it off. Don't think it's embarrassing. This may be a simple anatomical situation that you just had no idea you had. And men can have tight pelvic floors also, and that can cause problems with ejaculation or erection. So there are people that specialize in male pelvic floor disorders also. So, speaking of males, when men have orgasm challenges, one question would be, do you struggle with any sexual dysfunction issues that need to be talked about? They need to be addressed, or are you just ignoring it and hoping it'll go away? I know it's hard to talk about erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation, delayed ejaculation, or any kind of medical condition, but don't sweat it. Lots of guys have these issues, and there are lots of male urologists and pelvic floor specialists that specialize in men's physical health. So sometimes, again, it can be a minor tweak, like getting out of your head and managing your anxiety during sex, or it can be something more challenging, like stopping excessive porn viewing and turning towards your partner, which is really about sexual recovery from compulsive sexual behaviors, which is not a medical condition. It's a behavioral problem. And in any case, it's always best to see a medical doctor first. So, have you seen a urologist for these issues? And if urology gives you a clean bill of health, meaning your plumbing is working, consider talking to a sex therapist to get your needs met. So there is one question here about how do you help work through negative thoughts about fantasy when there's moral incongruence? Well, that is definitely a therapeutic issue. And so this idea that somebody says what's happening in my head is wrong, you know, wanting to metaphorically kill your partner or your mother or your kid or your boss is absolutely taboo, and there's a moral judgment against it. We would never go do that. But it doesn't mean we don't think those thoughts. I mean, the mind thinks all sorts of thoughts. And if we're judging morally every single thing we think, we would never leave our houses because we wouldn't trust ourselves to not do that. I mean, you can driving down the street and if somebody cuts you off, you might want to kill that person, but you're not going to kill them. You're just angry about it. That's a fantasy. I want to kill somebody. Or, I want to run that person over with my car, or I want to ram them with my shopping cart because they're so close, or they're waiting in line too long. Like all of these awful thoughts and feelings that we have does not make us bad people. We become bad people when there's no governor on board and we don't regulate and moderate our actual behavior. So I think I would be deconstructing the moral incongruence. Why is that morally wrong? Are you really actually hurting anybody? And who gave you those ideas? And what happens in your own bedroom and stays in your own bedroom is your personal business. So that just requires a lot of conversation and a lot of deconstruction of those ideas. All right. So I want to encourage you to enjoy your fantasy. Don't feel shame about them. Talk about it with your partner. If you are compulsively living in fantasy and not living in reality, you want to see a therapist about that. If you have any kind of pelvic pain disorders, go see a doctor, a gynecologist, a urologist if you're male. Find a pelvic floor specialist who can help you. Um, and, while you're working through pelvic pain disorders, just remember that penetration and performance are not sex. They are a tiny version of sex, but having experiences with your partner through touch, through cuddling, through masturbation or mutual masturbation, there are many, many ways to be sexual that don't include penetration if you're having some of these problems with disorder. And just the act of slowing everything down can lower anxiety and help you get through whatever struggles you may be having today in a way that is easy. All right. So for now we have one other question. I feel like not having a partner is hindering if I need pelvic exercises and exploring what feels good. Just do the exercises in the meantime? Yes. This has nothing to do with a partner. You should be working with a pelvic floor specialist and doing your home exercises and self-pleasuring. And if you're using vaginal dilators, in order to get through any kind of reflexive pain, then in some ways it may actually be easier than having a partner because you don't have the pressure of having partnered sex or partnered penetration. And then what are recommended ways of communicating a pelvic disorder to a partner? Well, talking to them first. I mean, going to see a doctor, maybe taking them with you to see the doctor. You have to talk about these things in the same way if you came home and you had like a, I don't know, a spot on your leg or your arm, and you go to the doctor or the dermatologist and you come back and say, oh, it was a wart, or oh, I have eczema on my arm. What's eczema? Oh, it's a skin disease and your skin gets flaky and itchy, but it goes away when you use blah blah sort of cream. Like you wouldn't have a big deal about talking about that with your partner, hopefully. So your genitals and what's going on with your genitals and your sexuality should have as little charge as talking about your elbow or your leg. Because if you have a lot of shame around it, then you want to examine what the shame is and why you have shame first and foremost. But the only recommended ways of communication is talking. You can't really send somebody a text about this or have somebody else tell them. You really need to be brave enough and vulnerable enough to just talk to your partner about it. All right. Well, that seems to be the end of our questions. So I hope you have a lovely rest of the week and that you embrace your fantasies and your sexuality. And if you're having any struggles at all sexually, please, please go see a medical doctor, go see a sex therapist, get the help you need so you're not suffering. And more importantly, so you can bring pleasure back into your life, at least sexual pleasure. All right. Take good care. And I look forward to seeing you in September.